Chosen one, the moment this message reaches you does not arrive by accident. In the quiet flow of your ordinary routine, something interrupts your attention and calls you to pause. It feels subtle at first, almost like a quiet nudge within your spirit, yet the weight behind it is unmistakable. This interruption is not simply a random thought or passing curiosity. Heaven has chosen this moment, deliberately drawing your focus because the season of silence surrounding your life is beginning to shift. The time has come for truths that were once hidden to finally be spoken clearly. As you listen, chosen one, you begin to understand that this message is not meant for every person who might hear these words. Many will hear them and move on believing they describe someone else's story. Yet there is a specific soul for whom this message was prepared long before today. It is meant for the one who walked through seasons that felt like fire without understanding why the heat never seemed to ease. It is meant for the one who endured testing that stretched patience and faith beyond comfortable limits. While others abandoned hope during similar trials, you continued believing quietly even when answers did not appear. The message speaks directly to the one who remained standing when confusion and pain attempted to extinguish the last spark of trust. Chosen one. Heaven now reveals that the silence you experienced in previous seasons was never a sign of rejection. Many nights you wondered why prayers seemed unanswered and why clarity felt distant while the struggles continued. It was easy to assume that silence meant abandonment or punishment. Yet heaven explains something different, that silence functioned as protection rather than absence. Certain truths about your purpose and identity could not be revealed prematurely because they carried a weight that required spiritual maturity to hold. Just as Scripture teaches in Ecclesiastes 3 that there is a time for every purpose under heaven, there was also a time when silence served as preparation. The message now brings a central revelation that changes how you understand the hardships you survived. You were never simply enduring life's difficulties without meaning. The fires, the testing, and the confusion were shaping you into someone capable of carrying a calling that required strength far deeper than comfort could produce. Like gold refined in the furnace as described in 1 Peter 1:7. Your faith was being tested so that its authenticity could emerge with greater value than anything temporary. What once appeared to be survival was actually preparation for something far more significant. Chosen one, as this introduction unfolds, you begin recognizing that every difficult season carried a hidden purpose. The endurance you developed, the wisdom gained through struggle, and the faith that survived uncertainty were all forming the foundation for what lies ahead. Heaven is no longer asking you merely to endure the journey. Instead, it is revealing that your story has been shaping you for a calling that requires depth, resilience, and readiness that only a refined spirit can carry. Chosen one, when you look back over the years that shaped your journey, one of the most confusing aspects was the silence you felt from heaven during the seasons when you needed answers the most. There were moments when your heart carried questions that seemed to echo into an empty sky. You prayed, searched for direction, and waited for clarity, yet the response you hoped for often did not arrive in the way you expected. Those seasons were filled with uncertainty, and at times it felt as if God had stepped back just when the path ahead became most difficult to navigate. In those moments, you wondered whether the silence meant disappointment, distance, or even rejection. Yet the truth that heaven now reveals changes the meaning of those years entirely. The silence was never abandonment, nor was it indifference toward your struggles. Instead, it was part of a deeper preparation that could only unfold away from immediate answers. Just as seeds grow beneath the soil long before their first visible sprout appears above the ground, the work God was doing within you required time in hidden places. While you were asking questions about your circumstances, heaven was shaping the structure of your character so that when the answers eventually arrived, you would possess the strength to carry them. Chosen one. Preparation often occurs in ways that feel invisible while they are happening. When you were walking through hardship, you may have believed that nothing meaningful was developing in those moments of waiting. Yet the observer who looks at your life from heaven's perspective sees something very different. Each challenge strengthened your resilience. Every delay forced you to examine your priorities and refine your understanding of purpose. Even the confusion you experienced became part of a training process that shaped your ability to trust God beyond what you could immediately see. The scriptures describe this hidden preparation in the story of Joseph. Before Joseph stood before Pharaoh as a leader capable of guiding an entire nation through famine, he spent years in prison and obscurity where no recognition appeared. Genesis 50:20 later revealed the meaning behind those difficult seasons when Joseph explained that what others meant for harm, God used for good in order to accomplish a greater purpose. Joseph's preparation required patience because the responsibilities awaiting him demanded maturity that could not be rushed. In a similar way, your life has unfolded through stages that were building strength beneath the surface, long before the calling connected to it could be revealed. Chosen one. One reason heaven allowed those seasons of silence was because truth carries weight. The calling prepared for your life was never meant to be treated lightly or approached with untested enthusiasm. If the full vision of your purpose had been revealed before your character was ready, the responsibility attached to it might have overwhelmed you. God understood that certain truths require emotional stability, spiritual discernment, and mental clarity before they can be carried safely. Without those qualities, revelation can become a burden rather than a blessing. The Apostle Paul wrote about this principle in Galatians 4:1-2 when he explained that an heir may possess a great inheritance, yet still live under guardians until the appointed time set by the Father. Even though the inheritance belongs to them, the responsibility connected to it must wait until maturity has formed. The silence you experienced functioned in a similar way. What was prepared for you already existed, but heaven waited until your spirit was capable of handling the weight of that assignment. Chosen one, during those quiet years, you were growing in ways you could not fully see at the time. Emotional strength developed through the trials that tested your patience and humility. Spiritual depth emerged through the prayers you continued offering even when answers seemed delayed. Mental clarity formed through the reflection required to understand your own patterns, fears, and motivations. Each of these areas had to mature because the truth that would eventually be revealed required a stable foundation capable of supporting it. The Bible repeatedly reminds believers that waiting seasons often carry purpose beyond what the human mind initially understands. Isaiah 40:31 declares that those who wait upon the Lord will renew their strength, rising on wings like eagles and running without growing weary. Waiting is not simply the absence of movement. It is the process through which strength is quietly renewed. While you believed you were standing still, heaven was reinforcing the inner structures that would allow you to move forward without collapsing under pressure later. Chosen one another important aspect of this preparation involved teaching you how to trust God beyond visible reassurance. Faith that depends entirely on immediate confirmation often weakens when circumstances become uncertain. By allowing you to walk through seasons where answers remained hidden, God helped you develop a deeper form of trust. You learned to continue believing even when clarity had not yet appeared. That kind of faith becomes essential when a calling requires stepping into responsibilities that others might not understand. The silence also protected you from distractions that might have appeared if the full picture had been revealed too early. When people receive glimpses of future purpose before their character is ready, they sometimes chase recognition instead of focusing on growth. Heaven knew that your preparation required humility and reflection rather than applause. By allowing the work to happen quietly, God ensured that the foundation of your calling would be built on authenticity rather than performance. Chosen one, as you reflect on those seasons now, the silence begins to look different from what it once seemed. Instead of representing absence, it becomes evidence of careful timing. Heaven was not ignoring your prayers. It was ensuring that when the answers arrived, you would be able to carry them with wisdom and strength. The maturity developed through those years became the preparation necessary for the next stage of your journey. And as the truth about those silent seasons becomes clear, chosen one, you begin to understand that heaven's quietness was never a sign that you were forgotten, but rather the patient work of a divine preparation that shaped your heart, mind, and spirit so that when the calling finally revealed itself, you would be ready to walk forward with the strength and maturity required to fulfill it. Chosen one, when you look back across the seasons that shaped your life, you can remember the moments that felt like walking through fire. There were betrayals that came from people you once trusted, doors that closed without explanation, and delays that stretched your patience until hope felt fragile. Some of those experiences carried heartbreak so deep that it changed how you saw the world and how you saw yourself. At the time, none of it appeared to follow a clear pattern. Each difficulty seemed isolated, random, and unfair, leaving you searching for meaning in circumstances that refused to make sense. Yet heaven now reveals something that reframes those years of struggle. The fire you walked through was never meant to destroy you. It existed as a refining process that shaped the kind of strength necessary for the purpose placed over your life. Fire in Scripture is often described not as an instrument of destruction, but as a tool of purification. Malachi 3:3 describes God as a refiner who sits carefully over the process, purifying silver until its true reflection appears. The refiner does not abandon the metal to uncontrolled flames. Instead, the process is carefully watched so that impurities are removed while the substance itself becomes stronger and more valuable. Chosen one, the betrayals you experienced were some of the most painful parts of this refining process. When trust breaks unexpectedly, it shakes the foundations of security and belonging that people depend on. In those moments, it can feel as though something precious has been stolen permanently. Yet the betrayal did more than wound your heart. It exposed which relationships were built on genuine loyalty and which ones existed only under convenient circumstances. The pain forced you to recognize the difference between people who stood with you because of who you were and those who remained only while the situation benefited them. The closed doors you encountered carried a similar hidden purpose. When opportunities disappeared or plans collapsed, you may have believed that you were being denied something important. At the time, it seemed as though progress was being blocked while others moved forward easily. Yet those closed doors were not merely obstacles. They acted as filters that prevented you from entering environments that could not sustain the calling attached to your life. Proverbs 16:9 explains that people may plan their path, but the Lord directs their steps. Many of the redirections that once looked like disappointment were actually protection from paths that would have limited your future. Chosen one, the delays that frustrated you were also part of the training that shaped your character. Waiting is rarely comfortable because it requires trusting a process that has not yet revealed its outcome. During those seasons, you learned patience that could not have been developed through immediate success. You discovered how to remain steady even when circumstances refused to change quickly. The endurance that formed during those periods became one of the most valuable strengths you carry today, because the responsibilities connected to your calling require stability over long periods of time. Heartbreak also played a role in this refining process, even though it may have been the most difficult part to understand. When love or connection breaks apart unexpectedly, it forces a person to examine the deeper layers of identity and expectation. Through those painful experiences, you learned that your worth could not depend entirely on the approval or presence of others. Instead, your identity began shifting towards something more stable and enduring. Psalm 34:18 reminds us that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. In the moments when your heart felt most fragile, heaven was closer than you realized, quietly strengthening the foundation of your identity. Chosen one. One of the most important effects of this fire was the removal of illusions. Before the trials arrived, there may have been assumptions about how life would unfold or who would remain beside you during difficult moments. The fire stripped away those illusions so that what remained was truth rather than comfortable expectation. You learned to see people opportunities and even your own motivations with greater clarity. That clarity became a form of wisdom that cannot be gained through comfort alone. Another result of the refining process was the removal of unhealthy dependencies. When life feels stable, it is easy to depend on certain structures, relationships, or environments for emotional security. Yet when those supports collapse unexpectedly, a deeper kind of strength begins to form. You learned how to stand even when familiar supports disappeared. This independence did not mean isolation. Instead, it meant discovering that your stability ultimately comes from something deeper than external circumstances. Chosen one, the Bible gives a powerful example of this process through the story of Joseph. Before Joseph ever stood before Pharaoh as a leader, trusted with national responsibility, he endured a series of events that looked like injustice and misfortune. His own brothers betrayed him and sold him into slavery. Later, he was falsely accused and thrown into prison even after demonstrating integrity in difficult situations. For years, Joseph lived in conditions that appeared far removed from the destiny he had once glimpsed in his dreams. Yet each stage of Joseph's journey prepared him for the leadership he would eventually carry. The pit taught him humility and resilience. The years of servitude trained him in responsibility and discipline. The prison developed patience and spiritual insight that allowed him to interpret dreams with wisdom. When the moment of elevation finally arrived, Joseph possessed the maturity necessary to handle the authority placed in his hands. Without those difficult seasons, the sudden rise to power might have overwhelmed him. Chosen one, your journey reflects a similar pattern. The pit and the prison in your life were not signs that your purpose had been canceled. They were training grounds where the qualities required for the next stage were quietly forming. The fire removed weaknesses that might have sabotaged your future while strengthening the parts of you that were meant to endure. As this truth becomes clearer, you begin to see that none of the suffering you experienced was meaningless. Every betrayal revealed hidden loyalties. Every closed door redirected your steps. Every delay strengthened your endurance, and every heartbreak reshaped your understanding of identity. Like Joseph, you passed through seasons that looked like loss before arriving at the threshold of elevation. And as you recognize the pattern behind those trials, chosen one, you begin to understand that the fire was never sent to destroy you, but to reveal the strength and purpose that could only emerge through refinement. Chosen one. For a long time, you believed the battles in your life were simply about survival. Each difficult season felt like a struggle just to make it through another day without losing hope or strength. When challenges came one after another, your focus naturally became endurance. You prayed for relief, asked for clarity, and hoped that eventually the storms would quiet so life could finally become stable. In those moments, it seemed as if the goal was simply to stay standing while everything around you attempted to shake your foundation. Yet heaven now reveals something far deeper about those battles. The struggles you faced were never merely about survival. They were always connected to destiny. While you believed you were fighting just to keep moving forward, another reality existed behind the scenes of your life. The intensity of the pressure was never random. It reflected the significance of the calling placed upon you long before you recognized it yourself. The conflict was not about whether you could endure difficulty. It was about whether the purpose attached to your life would remain intact. Chosen one. This truth explains why certain challenges in your journey felt unusually persistent or unusually heavy compared to what others around you seemed to experience. Many times you may have wondered why ordinary paths never seemed to work smoothly for you. Situations that looked simple for others often became complicated when you attempted them. Doors that opened easily for many people closed when you approached them, and environments where others felt comfortable often made you feel strangely out of place. At the time, these patterns felt confusing or even discouraging. However, heaven now reveals that those patterns existed because your life was never meant to follow an ordinary design. Jeremiah 29:11 speaks of God declaring plans for his people, plans to prosper them and give them hope and a future. That kind of purpose carries weight, and anything carrying significant purpose often encounters resistance before it fully emerges. The struggles you faced were not simply obstacles placed in your path. They were signs that your life was moving towards something greater than the routine expectations surrounding you. Chosen one, the enemy recognized the significance of your destiny long before you did. In the unseen realm, the potential within your life was never hidden. The spiritual authority, influence, and transformation connected to your calling were visible to forces that oppose the purposes of God. Because of that, attacks were often launched against you before you even understood why your journey felt so difficult. What appeared to be random hardships were frequently strategic attempts to discourage you before your identity and calling could become clear. Scripture reminds us of this pattern repeatedly. In the life of Moses, Pharaoh ordered the death of Hebrew children because he feared the future deliverer who would rise among them. Moses himself grew up unaware that he would one day confront Pharaoh and lead an entire nation to freedom. Yet the opposition against his life began long before he stepped into that role. Similarly, when Jesus was born, King Herod attempted to destroy the child because he feared the king that prophecy had foretold. These stories show that opposition often appears before purpose becomes visible. Chosen one, this same pattern existed in your own journey. The attacks you experienced were not signs of weakness. Instead, they revealed that something within you carried spiritual significance. When discouragement appeared repeatedly, it was often because something valuable was being protected. The enemy attempts to disrupt what he recognizes as dangerous to his influence. The intensity of the resistance you faced was not a reflection of your inability to succeed. It was evidence that your life carried the potential to influence others in ways that threatened darkness. This truth also explains why ordinary paths rarely satisfied your spirit. Many people find comfort in routines that offer stability but little transformation. Yet within you, there has always been a deeper restlessness, a sense that your life must hold meaning beyond simple survival or personal success. You may have tried to adapt to ordinary expectations, at times hoping life would feel easier if you blended into familiar patterns. Yet those attempts rarely lasted because your spirit recognized that you were created for something different. The Apostle Paul described this inner awareness in Ephesians 2:10, when he wrote that believers are God's workmanship created in Christ Jesus for good works that were prepared in advance for them to do. This verse reveals that purpose is not something randomly discovered later in life. It is something placed within a person long before they understand its full meaning. The calling embedded within you was present even during the seasons when you felt uncertain about your direction. Chosen one. Every spiritual attack you encountered eventually became confirmation that something uncommon lived inside you. The pressure often arrived when you were closest to personal growth or breakthrough. Moments when your faith began strengthening were frequently followed by situations designed to weaken your confidence. At the time, these patterns felt exhausting, yet they also revealed a deeper spiritual reality. Darkness does not waste energy attacking what carries no influence. Even the periods when you felt most isolated played a role in protecting the calling developing within you. Isolation can feel painful because human connection is essential for encouragement and support. Yet certain forms of isolation also function as protection while a person's identity and purpose are still forming. If you had been surrounded by constant approval or recognition too early, your focus might have shifted toward pleasing others instead of developing the strength required for your assignment. Chosen one. The battle you thought was about survival was actually shaping your readiness for destiny. Each test revealed parts of your character that needed strengthening. Each obstacle forced you to rely more deeply on God rather than on temporary support systems. Even the moments when you questioned your path helped refine your understanding of who you are and what you were created to do. As this truth becomes clear, you begin to see your past through a different lens. The battles that once looked like random struggles now reveal themselves as chapters in a larger story about purpose and calling. You were never simply fighting to survive. You were being prepared to step into a destiny that required resilience, wisdom, and faith developed through experience. And as heaven reveals this perspective, chosen one, you begin to recognize that every challenge you faced carried a hidden message, confirming that your life was never ordinary and that the battles surrounding you were never merely about endurance, but about protecting and shaping the destiny that God placed within you long before the journey began. Chosen one. When you look back across the years that shaped your life, you may notice that the timing of heaven rarely matched the expectations you carried in your heart. There were seasons when you hoped that if circumstances improved, if the right opportunity appeared, or if the pressure finally lifted, clarity would arrive with it. In those moments, it seemed logical to believe that God was waiting for the external situation around you to become stable before revealing the next step. Yet heaven now reveals something different, something far deeper than improved conditions or favorable timing. God was not waiting for circumstances to improve before speaking. He was waiting for transformation within you. The delay that once looked like silence was actually the time required for your inner world to change. Without that transformation, the truth connected to your calling would have arrived too early, and its weight would have been impossible to carry. What heaven required was not a better environment, but a stronger vessel. Chosen one, the transformation that took place within you did not happen quickly or comfortably. It unfolded through experiences that tested every layer of your character. Loss forced you to examine what truly mattered when the things you once depended on disappeared. Endurance taught you how to remain steady even when answers did not appear immediately. These seasons felt exhausting at the time, yet they became the training ground where deeper qualities began to develop inside you. Through these experiences, you gained discernment, the ability to recognize truth beneath appearances. Earlier in life, it may have been difficult to distinguish between genuine opportunities and distractions that looked promising but carried hidden consequences. As the years unfolded, however, your perception sharpened. Situations that once confused you became easier to understand. The Holy Spirit began guiding your awareness in subtle ways, fulfilling the promise spoken in John 16:13 that the Spirit of truth would lead believers into all truth. This discernment became essential because the calling placed over your life requires wisdom that sees beyond surface impressions. Alongside discernment, humility also developed within your spirit. Humility is not weakness or insecurity, but the understanding that strength and purpose come from God rather than personal pride. Earlier seasons may have tempted you to prove yourself or to seek recognition from people who doubted your potential. Yet through the trials you experienced, you began learning that approval from others cannot sustain a calling. True authority grows from a deeper place, one rooted in faith and obedience rather than applause. James 4:10 reminds believers that when they humble themselves before the Lord, He is the one who lifts them up at the appointed time. Chosen one, resilience also formed within you through the hardships you endured. Before those trials arrived, certain difficulties might have shaken your confidence or convinced you that the journey was too heavy to continue. Yet every time you faced a setback and found the strength to stand again, something inside you became stronger. The resilience you now carry is not the result of comfort, but the result of surviving circumstances that once seemed overwhelming. That resilience became proof that you were capable of enduring responsibilities far greater than what you once imagined. Faith also deepened during this transformation. At the beginning of your journey, faith may have depended heavily on visible encouragement or clear confirmation. Yet the seasons of waiting forced your belief to mature. You learned how to trust God even when the path ahead remained unclear. Hebrews 11:1 describes faith as confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Through your experiences, that definition stopped being an abstract idea and became a reality in your daily life. Faith grew within you until it no longer required constant reassurance. Chosen. 1. This transformation means that the person standing here today is not the same person who began the journey years ago. The earlier version of you carried sincerity and potential, but it lacked the depth required for the calling that awaited. Revelation arriving during that earlier stage might have overwhelmed you emotionally or spiritually. The weight of responsibility could have caused fear or confusion instead of clarity. Yet the person who has emerged through years of refinement now possesses the maturity necessary to carry that truth. The scriptures reveal this principle repeatedly. In Luke 16:10, Jesus explains that whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. This teaching highlights an important truth about spiritual responsibility. God often prepares individuals, gradually allowing them to grow through smaller challenges before entrusting them with greater influence. Each stage of development builds the stability needed for the next stage. The transformation that occurred in your life reflects that same process of preparation. Chosen one as your character strengthened, you also became capable of carrying authority without misusing it. Authority is not merely power or influence. In the kingdom of God, authority involves representing truth, guiding others with wisdom, and remaining anchored in humility while walking in responsibility. Without transformation, authority can become dangerous because it magnifies whatever already exists within a person's character. The years of refinement ensured that the authority connected to your calling would rest on a foundation of integrity rather than ego. The purpose that lies ahead requires exactly this kind of maturity. It calls for someone who has faced disappointment without losing compassion, someone who has experienced confusion yet continues seeking truth, and someone who has endured hardship without abandoning faith. The transformation within you ensures that the next stage of your journey will not be built on fragile enthusiasm, but on tested character. Chosen one, the silence you once questioned now reveals itself as careful preparation. Heaven waited because the truth connected to your destiny required someone capable of holding it with wisdom and strength. The person who once might have broken under the weight of revelation has been reshaped through endurance and faith. And now, as you stand at this moment of understanding, chosen one, you realize that transformation was never an obstacle delaying your calling, but the very process that made you ready to carry the truth, authority, and responsibility of the purpose that heaven prepared for you long before the journey began. Chosen one, as you reflect on the most recent season of your life, you may remember how the pressure seemed to intensify without warning. The exhaustion felt heavier than what you had experienced before, and the battles in your mind and spirit seemed unusually persistent. There were days when even simple tasks felt difficult because your energy had been drained by circumstances you could not fully explain. The weight of spiritual warfare became noticeable through moments of confusion, discouragement, and a sense that unseen forces were attempting to push you backward just when you hoped progress would finally appear. At the time, it was easy to interpret that intensity as evidence that something was going wrong. Yet heaven now reveals a truth that reframes that entire season. The exhaustion, the warfare, and the pressure were not signs that you were losing the battle. They were signs that the old season of your life was reaching its end. In many spiritual journeys, resistance increases just before transition occurs. When a chapter is closing and a new one is about to begin, opposition often intensifies because forces that oppose God's purposes attempt one final effort to disrupt what is already unfolding. What you experienced was not the collapse of your journey, but the final turbulence before the shift. Chosen one. The enemy pushed hardest during that period because he sensed that breakthrough was approaching. Even when you were uncertain about the timing of your calling, the spiritual realm recognized the movement happening around you. When purpose begins moving closer to manifestation, resistance often attempts to create doubt strong enough to delay that moment. The goal of such pressure is rarely immediate destruction. Instead, it is discouragement, the hope that exhaustion might convince you to stop believing before the promise arrives. This pattern appears throughout Scripture. In the book of Exodus, the Israelites experienced increased oppression just before their deliverance from Egypt. Pharaoh intensified the workload and suffering of the people when Moses first announced that God had heard their cries and was preparing to bring them out of bondage. The pressure increased precisely because the moment of liberation was drawing near. Similarly, in the New Testament, Jesus faced the most intense opposition in the days leading to the crucifixion and resurrection. The spiritual conflict reached its peak just before the greatest victory in history unfolded. Chosen one, your life followed a similar pattern during the recent season of struggle. The pressure you felt was not random. It reflected a spiritual awareness that something significant was about to change. When exhaustion reached its highest point, it often meant that the previous stage of your journey had nearly completed its purpose. The enemy hoped that if the burden became heavy enough, you might surrender hope or abandon the direction God had placed before you. Yet despite the fatigue and confusion, you continued moving forward. In many ways, you crossed an invisible threshold without realizing it. While you were still focused on enduring the battle, heaven was marking the moment when the struggle had already begun shifting. The most difficult part of the journey had been survived. The endurance you demonstrated during that season became evidence that the transformation within you was complete enough for the next chapter to begin. Even though the transition was not immediately visible, the crossing had already taken place. The Bible often describes these thresholds as moments when God changes the spiritual atmosphere around a person's life. Joshua experienced such a transition when the Israelites finally crossed the Jordan River into the land promised to them for generations. For years, they had wandered through wilderness seasons that seemed endless. Yet once the crossing occurred, the identity of the people shifted from wanderers to inheritors of promise. The change did not erase the memory of the wilderness, but it marked the beginning of a completely new chapter. Chosen one. The season you recently survived represents a similar crossing. The warfare that drained your strength was the final attempt to delay what God had already approved for your life. Heaven had already determined that your preparation was complete. The calling attached to your destiny had already been authorized. Yet the enemy attempted to extend the struggle in hopes that discouragement would cause you to retreat before the transition fully unfolded. However, that attempt failed because you endured the heaviest part of the battle. The strength developed through earlier seasons of refinement carried you through the final resistance. Even when the path felt uncertain, your faith did not disappear. Even when exhaustion made progress difficult, you continued trusting that God's presence remained with you. That perseverance became the final confirmation that you were ready for the next level of responsibility connected to your calling. Chosen one. Heaven now announces that the resistance you faced was not the beginning of defeat, but the closing moment of a previous chapter. The attacks that intensified around you represented the last effort to slow what God had already set in motion. When the enemy recognized that your breakthrough could no longer be prevented, the pressure increased as a final attempt to delay the inevitable. Yet the approval for your next season had already been issued long before the battle reached its peak. This revelation invites you to see your recent struggles through a different perspective. What once felt like the most exhausting part of your journey was actually the final resistance before transition. The threshold into a new chapter has already been crossed, even if the full manifestation of that change continues unfolding step by step. Heaven has not overlooked your endurance or forgotten the battles you survived. And as this truth settles within your spirit, chosen one, you begin to understand that the pressure you recently endured was never proof that you were falling behind, but the final resistance before the shift into a new season that God had already prepared and approved for your life long before the battle reached its peak. Chosen one, the moment has arrived when heaven begins revealing truth about the future that has been forming quietly beyond your sight. For years, your path often looked uncertain, as if you were walking through landscapes where direction felt hidden and clarity appeared only in fragments. There were times when your heart sensed that something meaningful was ahead, yet the details remained just beyond your reach. The uncertainty created seasons of hesitation where decisions felt heavy because the full picture was not visible. Yet heaven now speaks with assurance that the season ahead will not resemble the one you just endured. The next chapter of your life will look fundamentally different from the chapter that shaped you through struggle and preparation. The previous season required endurance, patience, and faith in circumstances that rarely offered immediate confirmation. Many of your steps were taken while you were still trying to understand why certain paths remained blocked, or why progress seemed slow despite your persistence. That period of endurance had a purpose, but it was never meant to last forever. Scripture reminds us in Ecclesiastes 3 that there is a time for every purpose under heaven, and the season of testing is always followed by the season of manifestation. Chosen one. One of the most noticeable changes in the coming season will involve doors that previously remained closed despite your efforts. For years, you knocked on opportunities that did not open, and at times it seemed as if the timing of your life did not match the effort you invested. You prepared yourself, pursued growth, and waited for the right moment, yet many of those doors remained firmly shut. At times, you wondered whether the doors were closing because something was missing within you. Heaven now reveals that those doors remained closed not because you were unworthy, but because the timing of their opening had not yet arrived. The scriptures offer a powerful reminder of this principle in Revelation 3:7-8, where God declares that when he opens a door, no one can shut it, and when he shuts a door, no one can open it. The authority over these doors never belonged to human approval or rejection. Heaven alone determines the timing of access. In the season ahead, doors that once resisted every effort will begin opening without force. Opportunities that previously required exhausting effort will appear with unexpected ease because the timing connected to them has finally arrived. Chosen one another transformation that will mark the new season involves the people who walk beside you. In previous years, many relationships drained your energy rather than strengthening your spirit. Some individuals entered your life during times when your identity and purpose were still forming, and not every connection was aligned with the direction God intended for you. These relationships sometimes created confusion, pressure, or emotional exhaustion because their presence did not match the calling developing within you. The new season will bring a shift in these connections. Divine relationships will begin replacing those that no longer align with your path. These connections will feel different because they will not require you to shrink your identity or silence your convictions. Instead, they will strengthen your clarity and encourage your growth. Proverbs 27:17 reminds us that iron sharpens iron, and in the coming season you will encounter people whose presence refines your vision rather than diminishing it. Their role will not be to control your direction, but to support the purpose already placed within you. Chosen one. These divine connections may appear in unexpected ways. Some will come through conversations that open doors you never anticipated. Others will appear through partnerships where mutual purpose becomes immediately recognizable. These relationships will feel peaceful rather than exhausting because they are rooted in alignment rather than convenience. Instead of draining your energy, they will expand your capacity to move forward with clarity and confidence. Alongside new connections, another major change in the coming season will be the clarity replacing the fog that once surrounded your path. For years, your journey involved walking through uncertainty where decisions required faith even when the outcome remained unclear. You prayed for direction, waited for confirmation, and sometimes wondered whether the silence meant you were moving in the wrong direction. Yet the fog was never permanent. It existed only until the moment when your preparation reached the point where clarity could safely be released. Chosen one, the coming season will bring instruction and direction that feel unmistakable. What once seemed confusing will begin making sense as pieces of the larger picture come together. The purpose attached to your life will become easier to recognize because the circumstances surrounding you will begin aligning with it. Isaiah 30:21 describes this kind of guidance when it says that whether you turn to the right or the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, "This is the way, walk in it." The clarity arriving in the next season will resemble that kind of guidance. This clarity will not simply provide answers about what to do next. It will also reveal why certain events in your past unfolded the way they did. Experiences that once felt disconnected will suddenly appear as pieces of a larger design. The skills you developed, the lessons learned through hardship, and even the relationships that ended will all reveal their role in shaping the path ahead. What once felt like scattered chapters will begin forming a coherent story. Chosen one. The purpose, instruction, and direction released in this season will allow you to move forward with confidence rather than hesitation. Decisions that once required long periods of uncertainty will now unfold with a sense of peace that confirms alignment. This peace does not mean the journey will be free from responsibility or challenge. Instead, it means that the path itself will become clearer as heaven begins revealing the next stage of your assignment. And as this revelation settles within your heart, chosen one, you begin to understand that the future being revealed now is not a distant promise, waiting somewhere beyond your reach, but the unfolding reality of a new season where doors open, relationships align, and clarity replaces confusion because heaven has decided that the time for preparation has ended and the time for purpose to move forward has finally begun. Chosen one, as the new chapter of your life unfolds, you will begin to recognize a shift that is both internal and external. The season ahead is not simply about change in circumstances, but about the emergence of clarity and favor that were quietly developing during the years of preparation you endured. What once felt hidden will gradually become visible, and the gifts that were refined in silence will begin operating with a new level of sharpness and confidence. This transition may feel surprising at first because the quiet seasons of development rarely look connected to the visible outcomes that follow them. In the coming season, you will notice that your spiritual perception becomes clearer than it has ever been before. Decisions that once required long periods of uncertainty will begin to settle with a sense of calm assurance. Instead of confusion, you will experience discernment, guiding your steps in ways that feel both peaceful and steady. James 1:5 promises that if anyone lacks wisdom, they can ask God, who gives generously without finding fault. The wisdom you receive during this time will not feel distant or complicated. It will come with clarity that allows you to recognize the direction you are meant to take. Chosen one. Along with this clarity will come a deepening peace that anchors your spirit. In earlier seasons, anxiety may have followed moments of uncertainty, especially when you were trying to interpret circumstances that did not immediately make sense. Yet the peace promised in Philippians 4:7, which surpasses understanding and guards both heart and mind, will begin to shape how you approach the future. This peace does not eliminate responsibility or effort, but it removes the fear that once accompanied difficult decisions. As your inner clarity grows, the gifts that were quietly forming within you will begin operating with greater strength. Talents that once felt uncertain will now appear more defined. Insights that once arrived as faint impressions will become clearer and more reliable. The years of preparation you experienced were not wasted time, but a process of sharpening the abilities that God placed within you. Proverbs 18:16 teaches that a person's gift makes room for them and brings them before great people. In this season, those gifts will begin opening doors that previously remained closed. Chosen one. One of the most noticeable changes will involve how people respond to you. In earlier seasons, many individuals overlooked your potential because the work happening within you was not yet visible. Some people may have misunderstood your quiet preparation or underestimated your abilities because the evidence of your growth was still forming. Yet, as the new season unfolds, the same people who once overlooked you will begin recognizing something different in your presence. This shift will not occur because you are trying to prove your value or demand recognition. Instead, the transformation will be visible through the fruit of your life. Jesus described this principle clearly in Matthew 7:16 when he said that people recognize a tree by its fruit. The growth that occurred during your hidden seasons will now produce results that others cannot ignore. Your wisdom, resilience, and discernment will become evident through the way you handle responsibility and opportunity. Chosen one, people who once paid little attention may begin seeking your perspective or asking for your guidance. Some will notice the stability and clarity that define your presence, while others will recognize the integrity that shaped your journey. This attention may feel unfamiliar at first because it contrasts with the quiet seasons when your efforts seemed invisible. Yet the recognition you experience will not come from self-promotion. It will come from the visible results of the transformation that has already taken place. Alongside this recognition, blessings and opportunities will begin arriving with unusual speed and clarity. The progress that once felt slow will start accelerating because the preparation required for these opportunities has already been completed. Doors that remained closed for years will open unexpectedly, and invitations that once seemed impossible will begin appearing in ways that feel almost effortless. Psalm 90:17 expresses this promise by asking that the favor of the Lord would rest upon his people and establish the work of their hands. Chosen one, this favor does not mean that life will become effortless or free from responsibility. Instead, it means that the alignment between your preparation and your purpose will begin producing visible results. Opportunities will match your abilities, and connections will support the direction of your calling. What once required constant striving will begin unfolding more naturally because the timing of heaven now aligns with the readiness of your spirit. Another remarkable aspect of this season will be the clarity with which you recognize alignment. In the past, certain opportunities may have looked promising but carried hidden complications or distractions. Now your discernment will help you identify what truly belongs to your path. Instead of chasing every possibility, you will recognize the doors that carry peace and purpose. This clarity will protect you from distractions that once consumed unnecessary energy. Chosen one, the hidden work of past seasons will gradually become visible through the fruit appearing in your life. The resilience developed through hardship will allow you to handle responsibility without becoming overwhelmed. The humility formed during seasons of silence will help you remain grounded even as recognition increases. The faith strengthened through waiting will guide you through new opportunities with confidence rather than fear. As these changes unfold, others will begin noticing the difference between who you were during the earlier stages of your journey and who you have become now. They will see the growth that occurred quietly over time. They will observe the strength that emerged from endurance, and they will recognize the wisdom shaped through years of reflection and faith. Chosen one, the season of public favor and spiritual clarity is not a reward for surviving hardship, but the natural outcome of the transformation that took place within you. The hidden seasons were never meaningless delays. They were the preparation that ensured your gifts, character, and faith would align with the opportunities now appearing before you. And as you continue stepping forward with the peace and discernment that now guide your path. Chosen one, you begin to see that the years of invisible growth were building a foundation strong enough to carry the favor, recognition, and fruit that heaven is now allowing the world to see. Chosen one, heaven now speaks with a clarity that leaves no room for doubt about where your life stands in this moment. The message is not that the difficult season you endured is nearly finished or gradually fading away. Heaven declares that the old season has already ended. The struggles that defined those years served their purpose, and the chapter shaped by confusion, delay, and endurance has reached its conclusion. What once felt like a long road without a clear destination now reveals itself as preparation that has already accomplished what it needed to accomplish. For a long time, you lived under conditions that made it difficult to recognize where your journey was heading. The weight of uncertainty often overshadowed your ability to see progress clearly. There were moments when confusion surrounded decisions and when delay seemed to stretch longer than your patience could comfortably hold. During those times, you wondered whether the silence you experienced meant that heaven had forgotten your path or postponed your purpose indefinitely. Yet the truth that is now being revealed overturns those fears completely. Chosen one, you were never living under abandonment. Even when circumstances appeared silent, heaven remained deeply involved in shaping the direction of your life. Psalm 121 reminds us that the one who watches over us neither slumbers nor sleeps. The protection and guidance surrounding you did not pause simply because answers were delayed. Instead, God continued orchestrating events, quietly arranging circumstances that would align with your purpose when the time of unveiling arrived. Now, heaven announces that the environment surrounding your life has shifted. You are no longer standing beneath the shadow of confusion and delay. Instead, you are entering a season defined by clarity and purpose. The difference between these two seasons will feel profound because the conditions shaping your path will begin supporting your calling rather than obstructing it. The clarity you now experience will guide decisions with confidence, replacing the uncertainty that once dominated your thoughts. Chosen one, what you always sensed quietly within your spirit is now being confirmed openly. For years, there was a deep awareness inside you that your life carried meaning, beyond the ordinary patterns you observed around you. Even when circumstances suggested otherwise, that inner sense of purpose never fully disappeared. You may have questioned it at times, wondering whether it was imagination or misplaced hope. Yet heaven now confirms that what you sensed was real all along. The reason that awareness remains strong within you is because it came from the purpose God planted in your life long before your journey began. Jeremiah 1:5 speaks about this truth when God tells the prophet that he knew him before he was formed and appointed him for a specific purpose. The calling attached to your life existed before many of the circumstances that shaped your story. Even when the path felt unclear, the foundation of that purpose never disappeared. Chosen one. The truth that is now being revealed shows that you were never forgotten during the years when progress seemed slow. Instead, you were being positioned carefully. Positioning often happens quietly because it involves aligning many different elements at the same time. God was not only preparing you internally, but also arranging circumstances around you that would eventually support your calling. These preparations required patience because every piece needed to reach its proper place before the next chapter could begin. The concept of positioning appears throughout Scripture. When David was anointed as king, years passed before he actually stepped into the throne. During that time, he served in places that appeared ordinary or even difficult, including years spent fleeing from Saul's pursuit. Yet every stage of David's journey prepared him for leadership that required wisdom, courage, and humility. When the moment of elevation finally arrived, he was ready to carry the responsibility that accompanied his calling. Chosen one, your life has followed a similar pattern. The experiences that once seemed disconnected were gradually aligning you with the place where your purpose could emerge clearly. The lessons you learned through hardship built resilience. The seasons of reflection strengthened your discernment. The moments when you felt overlooked protected you from environments that might have distracted you from the deeper work happening within you. Now you stand at the threshold of a completely new life. This transition does not mean that challenges will never appear again. Every meaningful calling carries responsibility and effort. Yet the atmosphere surrounding your life will feel different because the alignment between your preparation and your purpose has finally arrived. Instead of constant delay, you will experience movement. Instead of confusion, direction will become clearer. Instead of isolation, the right connections will begin appearing at the right moments. Chosen one. The peace that accompanies this new chapter will become one of its most noticeable features. In earlier seasons, peace sometimes felt distant because uncertainty dominated your thoughts. Now, the peace promised in Isaiah 26:3, which speaks of perfect peace for those whose minds remain steadfast in God, will become more present in your daily life. This peace will not eliminate responsibility, but it will anchor your spirit even when the journey ahead requires courage and commitment. Alongside peace will come abundance in ways that reflect God's provision rather than human striving. Abundance does not simply refer to financial resources, although provision may certainly appear in practical ways. Abundance also includes opportunities aligned with your gifts, relationships that strengthen your path, and wisdom that guides decisions. John 10:10 speaks of Christ bringing life in abundance, a life filled with purpose and spiritual richness that extends beyond material success. Chosen one. The calling that now begins unfolding will allow you to use the gifts and lessons developed during your hidden seasons. What once looked like isolated experiences will become tools that equip you to influence others with wisdom and compassion. The resilience formed through your trials will allow you to guide others who face similar struggles. The faith strengthened through waiting will become a testimony that encourages people who feel uncertain about their own journeys. And as you stand at this threshold, you begin recognizing that the life ahead is not merely an improved version of the one you endured before. It is a new chapter shaped by clarity, peace, and purpose. Heaven has confirmed what your spirit sensed long ago. You were never abandoned or forgotten, but carefully positioned for a calling that required patience and preparation before it could be revealed. Chosen one. The old season has ended, And the new life you once sensed quietly within your spirit is no longer a distant promise waiting somewhere in the future, but the unfolding reality of a path now opening before you, marked by peace, abundance, and the clear direction of the purpose God prepared for you long before the journey began.